All right, hello and welcome to another episode of ProPresenter Power Talks. What is up, ProPresenter Poppy?
How's it going?
Man, it's going so good, Steve. We got a chance to hang out for a couple days live and in person.
That's a scary thought.
We we flew together.
We did on the way back. Yeah, we got to fly
Yeah,
together.
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know, man.
Which we've never done before.
Don't know
And
if I ever want to do it again. Just kidding.
wait, why not?
Just kidding.
What?
Just kidding.
And we were heroes on that flight, Steve.
We were. We accepted the responsibility.
We accepted the responsibility.
Mission impossible. Sitting next to an exit
Yep.
row these days on a Boeing aircraft is a
Yeah.
life challenging event. So
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah. I did have a moment. I didn't think about it on the way to South Carolina, but on that flight with you, I did have a moment where I was like, wait, isn't Boeing the aircraft that
Yep.
where the doors are flying off?
Yep.
And I
Uh,
was like, oh, wait, maybe I should have picked a different
yep.
seat.
So we could tell the world that I got on the flight. I told that the whole Boeing situation to our team, just as an example of quality and assurance and all that. And our owner Carl was traveling the next week and texted me and said thanks for sharing about doors flying off of airplanes. I'm sitting next to an exit row today. So that I texted our team last week when I got on the flight on Wednesday. I was sitting on the exit row as well, and I was like, I'm living on the edge, sitting in an exit row. So,
Yeah.
you know, you know.
Oof.
So,
I mean, that would have definitely made the trip more memorable.
well, you notice I let you sit at the window, and I sat on the aisle. So, I
Yeah.
looked.
Okay. See, I thought that I had chosen the window, but I guess it was just the illusion
It
of
was the illusion
choice.
of choice. I let you. Let you pick where you wanted to go, and you picked the window. So I said, "Okay, great."
Yeah, you did like a mentalism routine on me. I see. Okay.
You know,
Okay. Okay,
got
Steve.
behind you on the line, getting on the plane, so you would pick where you want to sit.
Smart.
Well, what are we going to talk about today? I'm sorry we're a little late, guys. We had a little bit of technical difficulty getting live, but we figured it all out, I
Yeah.
think. So
Technical difficulties happen to the best of us. Doesn't
that's
matter
right.
who you are. You can be the pro presenter Poppy and still deal with technical issues.
Yeah, I will say that these issues were not technical ProPresenter issues. They were Skype
Correct.
issues,
Yeah.
which Skype is always
Right.
known to have problems. So,
Right. I
you
mean,
know,
it is a Microsoft product after all.
it is. And we all know that Microsoft products, but so
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Steve, today we're going to be talking about training volunteers to use ProPresenter. Specifically, we're going to talk about some ways that you've done it over the years. It's really cool. I'm excited to talk about it.
What about you, man? Like I remember you sharing a couple weeks ago that you had your ProPresenter volunteers on stage with you. What did that
Yeah.
training process look like in a kid space to get a volunteer trained and ready to go to run? Like, did you just plug and play? And since you guys were next to each other on stage, you were there to help with issues, or did you do any sort of training or formalized training? What did that look like?
So we never had like a formalized training process. A lot of times the way that our team members would kind of work to that point um, is number one, they were recruited. We picked people with the right personality for that role. That was a really important part of it because, as you know, not just anybody feels comfortable sitting behind a computer. Um, so, uh, so I think what would happen the most often, and definitely in this last church that I worked at, um, we did a lot of events, throughout the year, throughout whatever, and during that time, or if there was like childcare or something, we would kind of put people in in the pro presenter chair and just kind of give them some tips in a very very low pressure situation, like our VBS. um, During the day when the kids were doing activities outside of our main room, or even if it was like they're watching a movie, so we I just show one of the volunteers how to you know find a video on ProPresenter or any of that stuff. Um, so that way it's like hands-on training. And then because they're on stage with me and with the team, whatever happens, we can deal with it right then and there. And we just kind of turned that into part of the production, part of the experience. So it's like, um, well, we'd make jokes like, all right, we're gonna count to three and it's gonna work. One, two, three, and of course it wouldn't work, and so then that becomes a joke, or start talking about Wi-Fi issues, and kids are like, "Oh yeah, Wi-Fi issues," but it has nothing to do.
Little deceit
uh,
goes a long way.
yeah, right. It's what you did mentalism, I do sleight of hand. It's the same.
Sleight of hand. I love it. Well, I love about like the churches I was in. I don't think ever did what you modeled there, which is really cool because I kind of like that because you can kind of play around with that and have that person on
Yeah,
stage, DJ, and be able to do that.
right.
So that's really cool. I've never, in all our conversations, I'm learning some stuff here. That's a cool model of, depending on how your kids ministry or student ministry is formatted, could be a good way to go.
Hmm.
Um, in my experience, what the flip side of that coin of setting your team up to be more like your big space is you could train people from a young age what it's like to run ProPresenter in the big room,
Hmm.
and it's the same across all the others. So one thing I tried to preach was standardization across my kids, student, and adult ministry. And so
Yeah.
we did that by eventually pulling the kids up from Song Show into ProPresenter, which was a huge transition
Hmm.
for them to make that transition. But it allowed me to standardize everything with the hope that kids who are learning to run ProPresenter in student and youth would get to a point where they're ready to run in the adult space, and you're not having to train them. Well, where is this button? How do I edit a slide? How do I create a slide? How do I, click the slide? How do I manage some of those things? You're
Hmm.
training them on more higher level end stuff about customizing it for
Right.
the room. So I had some
And
some. St- no, go ahead.
so uh, in this week we were together. I recorded a course on using visuals in kids church and kids ministry. And one of the benefits of using visuals is that you do create this like discipleship pipeline, where you've got these preteens or teenagers running the computer in your kids' church room or your youth ministry. And because of their comfortability, because of their experience, and because of their, kids tend to be pretty tech savvy, just almost, you know, by nature.
Right.
So allowing them to grow in those abilities, and then kind of eventually use them in other spaces, it's just another way that we kind of help people use their talents for Jesus.
Absolutely.
So that, yeah, so I love that.
Yeah. So yeah. So what I tried to do was have a structure of when someone comes to me to learn in the big room, what is my process? And like what I had to
Right.
be combative of there is that obviously when we get into like large worship gatherings, there is a desire to not have people who are learning the first time. They're trying to figure it out on the fly
Yeah. Right.
because that
Yep.
becomes a distraction environment. So there's that balance of constantly
Hmm.
trying to bring people on, disciple them, train them, raise them up, grow them to be people who can serve in our ministry. I think that's a huge part of what I love to do. But I also have to couple that with we want our worship services to be unity driven, united driven, to unite people to sing, worship, and we
Hmm.
want it to be as distraction free as possible because when the lyrics are wrong and stuff's just a mess, it's really hard to focus. I mean,
Yeah.
it's funny, more in my old age, I'm finding my mind runs continually more than it ever has. And so, even in a gathering that there is not a lot of distraction, there can be like my mind focusing on different things. And so, I don't want to create
Yeah.
anything that distracts or detracts. So what I kind of set up was almost like a structured plan in my mind of how I ran volunteers through ProPresenter training. Um, so I'd love to share that with you guys. Love to Shake to push back, ask any questions, maybe pick apart if
Yeah.
there's anything you feel like maybe I should change in my model. And then at the end, I'd love to give a link in the chat for you guys if you guys are interested in using. I created a ProPresenter 101 course with kind of what I do with my volunteers initially is like showing them the basics of ProPresenter. So how do you create slides, how do you edit slides, and actually there's some stuff in there that I probably didn't show a volunteer from day one that if I was doing now I would probably shift to. So I'm actually about to
Mhm.
train a new person on the church that I'm at. It's a smaller church, and I'm probably going to send them that link today and have them say, hey, look through some of this, and then I'd love to show you some of the ropes as we get going. So when someone would come to me and say, hey, I'm interested in, whether it's a student or youth, maybe he's dabbled in the ProPresenter space, and they're coming up to me, or maybe it's a new one, I'm going to kind of try to figure out what is your aptitude with ProPresenter. Have you ever touched the program at all? Have you never? If you've touched the program at all, I'm probably going to try to figure out like what have you done with the program. Because if it's someone that has run it in the youth and they know how to click the space button and they know how to navigate
Mhm.
around, I'm probably not going to go send them some video where it's like, hey, this is ProPresenter. The logo is this. Open it up. Like I'm going to probably try to skip some of that. So I'm trying to figure out what is their aptitude and their understanding. I always am going to try to on the first night give them kind of the basic rundown of the setup because that's customized to the space. So I'm going to hopefully provide some links. Whether for you might use my ProPresenter class. It's like, hey, when I meet the first time and they say they're interested, I'm going to set up an opportunity for them to come back and be at a rehearsal and I'm going to give them this link and say, hey, when you come back, I'd love for you to look at this, watch this, check this out, and then when you come back to your first rehearsal, I'd love to meet with you. So I would use one
And
of two. Go ahead.
does that give you some like immediate street cred? If you're like, hey, here's my course. Does that make people go, oh, he's got a course?
I mean, I hope it would now. Back in the day, I didn't have a course, so I had a couple of like
Yeah.
videos from Pro Presenter Brad Weston that I would suggest people go watch, and then I would almost do my own training with them. So that was where really far back in the day, I would almost do the training myself, kind of the initial on
Mhm.
hands training. Um, but what I've really pushed people to, what my desired template would be, we at the church we were at. And this is an example of a reason why you should be recording your worship services, whether you can record them multi-track for your audio team to then go back and mix, or maybe you can't do that, but at least record the entire service audio as a two-track kind of thing. And the reason is I would hold what I call master classes, and they were opportunities on a Thursday night or Friday night where I'd bring in pizza and I'd bring in
Mhm.
team and I would say, hey, we're going to run through the service as if it's live. So we're going to have the camera ops come in. We're going to have the video, the serve team come in. The only people that wouldn't be there would be the people on stage, the band. I do think if you are working with your team and your worship team will be willing to have a rehearsal or like a audition session on those nights, it could
Mhm.
be really cool because that would be an opportunity to kind of do that. But we didn't have the ability to have the people on stage, so what we would do is set kind of like dummy, sticks up and faces up and
Yeah.
have some stuff lined out. But then I would bring everyone in. We'd run lighting cues. We'd run video on screen. We'd run iMag, we'd run ProPresenter, and we had the ability to track it. So we also had audio members who were learning, being able to actually mix the audio and hear different things and what
That's
they're
great.
doing. So I love doing it. I called it a master class, and just because it was the coolest thing I could come up with. But what my desired thing was to bring every volunteer who was looking at serving and even interested in ProPresenter to come to that because then I could put them in there for a song and say, hey, you kind of dabbled around and watched some stuff. Here, run a song. And kind of as we're going through the song, hey, you're running those transitions a little slow. I like to do second to last word because we want people to worship and experience, and you're running it slow. So here, let's move that up a little bit. That's a little faster. Or hey, we're coming out of song into another
Right.
song. How do you get through that transition? Hey, we're coming out of this song into a bumper. Here's what we do in our space. The producer is going to call the bumper cue. So when we get to the end of the song, you're holding, you're holding, you're holding, and you're waiting for that producer in your ear to call lights go, video go, and you're not going until he says video go. And you're going to do exactly what he says because he's calling the show. He sees the whole entire thing.
Right.
So we were able to have those conversations to show people in real time, hey, if you disregard what the producer says, here's what happens. Here's how that looks. But if you listen and we all do our part, here's how this can look. And so I loved using master classes as an opportunity to train new people up to, hey, here's how we're going to run it on Sunday. Here's what you're going to see. Here's what you're going to be asked to do. Here's what you need to do. So I'd use that along with, we always did rehearsals for Sundays on a Wednesday night. And we would do a full rehearsal. So the band would start, at 7:30 or whatever to about 8:30. They would do practicing each song, kind of running through it, tweaking it, figuring out what they want to do. And then at 8:30, they would call when they're done. They'd say, "Hey, we're done. We're ready for run through." And then we would reset real quick. So if there was any reset, whether it was bathroom breaks or whatever, we'd do that, and we would fire the last 1 minute of a countdown, and we would actually run through the service as if it was live without any of the talking parts. But we would actually run through every single thing as if it was live. So during the rehearsal, we're running stuff, we're tweaking stuff, we're watching, and we're taking notes. So I'm training my team how to make notes, make edits on the fly, edit slides, rearrange slides if there needs to be something that's tweaked, listen to the cues that are going to be called and the clicks and the guides, make sure those aren't confusing. And then by the time we're ready to go, we're running through. And so this is your opportunity as you're an operator every Sunday to get your practice session in. So you're going to run through the whole entire service with your team, and then we would roll. I would use that night if I didn't have a master class. Like sometimes I do a master class like every other month or quarterly. So if that was the case, I would use the rehearsal night to train new volunteers because I could get them through rehearsals and give them reps that weren't live on a Sunday. And so what I would do as often as I would have either one of my pros, one of my people that's gone through my initial training of, 4 to 6 weeks, and they've been running it multiple times, and I'm confident in their ability, or myself if I needed to run it. And I would allow then to open up room for the rehearsal time for someone else who needed a rep to learn and grow. And so then they would learn and grow. And then what I do is I would usually, to me, the indicators are a couple of things. One, when the person's transitioning well and they're doing lyrics ahead of when they're supposed to be sung as I'm asking them, that's a huge key for me. Because oftentimes people, it's against your brain DNA almost to like do it that way. So once a person is actually doing that, that starts to me say, okay, they're actually transitioning where I'm asking them. Two, I wanted them to not feel like shook going to different parts of the service, understanding how to navigate. So I'm always watching like how are they acting in a song? Are they tense or are they comfortable? Are they do they feel comfortable? Is the vibe I'm getting from them one of ease and comfortability, or is it one of like, man, this is stressful still? So I'm watching their kind of tone and how they're acting. I'm watching. I oftentimes during rehearsals will walk away because I want to portray like
Mm.
I'm not there. So I want to walk away in the room and see how it's looking in the room, and then I'll come back, and then I'll come in and come out, and I kind of would play this game of like not being next to them the whole time, so they don't feel like I'm like over their head about to bop them. But I could also leave and come back and say like, did they hit everything while I was gone? It seemed like, and when I come back, is they just continue to roll? So I would check that out, and then kind of the thing for me, I always really kind of wanted someone to do 2 to 3 practices before I ever gave them a Sunday, because then they would have done, you know, 2 to 3 practices. Let's say they do 3, they'd probably have gone through 12 sets, 12 songs, in an actual live environment. They've done it enough where it's like, okay, now I know how to get through songs. I understand the arrangements. I understand coloring, color coding, all that. And then on a Sunday, the first Sunday, I would not just schedule them and roll. I would always schedule them with someone. So they would be scheduled with one of my
Mhm.
pros next to them. So we had 2 machines. One was a fully redundant backup. So I would have someone scheduled as a backup on that machine. Now, what would happen on Sunday is depending on the aptitude, I had a lot of people that just really took off in aptitude and like really did a great job of growing and making a quick transition. So by that Sunday, often like someone would call out by first service, and I would just send that person down to run a camera, and like they'd kind of be a backup
Mm.
because I was confident in what we had gotten through and where we were. But I would have them there as a backup in case something did fail and there was a catastrophic issue. I had someone to kind of help stop gap and be there. So I would always kind of like schedule, whether it was myself being in a floating role or a producer role where if I had to jump in, I could do it, or schedule someone who was a pro level, who'd done multiple stuff with me and who knew kind of how I operate pro. I would have them in the booth with us because I wanted to have a safety net, so to speak. So I'd run that safety net for sure the first time, sometimes even the second time. And then for me, the sweet spot was, kind of 2 to 3 times behind the scenes. Then you get promoted 2 to 3 times, kind of checking how Sundays go, making sure people are happy, making sure glitches and stuff don't scare you on a Sunday, making sure the worship team doesn't have any
Right.
complaints. And then 2 to 3 times, with some help. And then by that point, I would be ready to start scheduling them by themselves. And then from there, I would want to raise up, you know, my next goal was to always start looking for who are my higher level leaders that I can now promote from a pro presenter spot to something else. So for me, that was a producer spot. So now that you've done pro presenter, you kind of understand that. Who can I promote into a producer level spot who understands the whole picture, who can start to understand the whole picture now, not just pro presenter, and start training them to that. So you almost kind of have, for me, I would always have it's almost like a 101, 201. So I'd have people in a 101 course class getting to learn, growing and learning. And then once they've done their reps on Sunday and I feel confident with what they're producing, then I'm starting to look at who can I raise up into a 201
Right.
setting. And so that's part of why this course that I'm going to drop in the chat here, um, this link here is ProPresenter 101. To me, that's kind of the 101 basics that I think you as an operator would want to understand before you even go run ProPresenter on a Sunday, or at least half of them. The last half of that course, I do talk about some maybe a little more complex stuff, but I still think it'd be something great if someone could plow through all that content and then show up to your rehearsal. They're probably going to feel really confident about understanding how to run the program and really confident about how to get out of minor situations that may arise that they don't know what just happened, kind of thing. So that was my key, was to always try to bring people along a little slower than faster, because that's how I learned, to be honest. I got into production space and at a small church that closed down, and we merged with another church. And when I was trying to learn audio with the guy, I I, I watched him on audio for 6 to 9 months before he ever let me run on a Sunday, and it just gave me an
Wow.
opportunity to like watch, learn, understand the console, understand everything. And so I'm a huge proponent of, don't just take someone who comes in and says, "Hey, I can run slides," and put them into running on the first Sunday without any help. So
Was would say 8 to 9 months. That feels like too long.
I think it's too long for, I don't think it's too long for audio. I think, to be honest, four to
Okay.
six
Yeah.
months
Sure.
audio, you
Sure.
need to
Sure.
understand the person's ear. You need to have the
Hmm.
ability to kind of go on that journey together. Pro presenter for sure. I think, the
Sure.
ideal would be, 2 rehearsals. Maybe the sweet spot was 2 rehearsals, 2 Sundays. So within 2 to 3 months, I'm starting to get to a spot where they've been scheduled twice on a Sunday, and twice or
Yeah.
3 times on a Sunday, and I have a body of work to now say they're ready to go, and I can start to schedule them as the primary without a backup. And I would, in my mind, I would then start to kind of like, you'd almost have like a leaderboard, and so they would start to climb into, well, now I trust them, and so now the question is like,
Hmm.
where do they rank as far as people I trust, as far as if I'm on vacation. So if I'm
Right.
on vacation and I need 2 pros to cover me, who are those 2 pros? And that really just comes down to people's aptitude and ability, and how quickly they pick things up, how quickly they understand the whole spectrum. So, in my case, we were dealing with our pro presenter operators would control turning the key on and off, so the lyrics on and off the screen, and the notes on and off the screen that we use in lower thirds, they were the ones controlling that. And so that was a whole dynamic that there was pro presenter understanding that, but there was also understanding how to manage the video aspect of putting content on and off screen and when to do that. And so the people that often climbed through the ranks of understanding pro presenter first then started to connect dots in the video world quicker. And so then those people became pretty quickly high aptitude people that I could trust with anything in that space. If they were just learning ProPresenter, it would be a more gradual take. But that's one thing I would encourage for volunteers is like don't be mad or like frustrated with slow playing that. Like I felt there were times I felt frustrated with that 6 to 9 month wait, but I look back and it's like, man, that was really good because I was set up for success.
Mhm.
So like, don't take waiting to be like a punishment. Like I think we see in the Bible often that God works in the waiting, and I think the same thing can be true for
Mhm.
you. Is like trust people who are leading in these areas to like know like, hey, I still see some things here that I think if you got caught with this, that would be a huge concern. Like
Mhm.
hey, you react when a slide is not right. Instead of going and fixing it, you react and you freak out. Okay, maybe we need to keep working together because, like, hey, if
Right.
something's wrong on a Sunday in the middle of like, hey, they want to change the chorus they want to do for the response song, I probably can't count on you yet to just go make that change real quick
Right.
without freaking out. You're probably going to freak out at that point. So there's things like that that I could always like gauge where my volunteers were and are, and so it takes time. And so, like for example, the church I'm at now is way smaller church plant, and so I have to put people in position quicker on a team because I'm running
Mhm.
at a more lean team. But I still do similar things. So, like I have a girl who's going to serve this Sunday, who's the daughter of one of the pastors, and the reason I'm putting her in that spot now is because she came in on with her dad for the last year, and there's been multiple times where my ProPresenter operator was late, and she jumped in and ran slides during rehearsal and did a fantastic
Nice.
job. So like she probably doesn't have all the sermon notes experience, which I'm going to have to work with her on. But she did a great job of learning how to run lyrics, how to change lyrics, how to tweak lyrics, how to run that. And so I've seen a body of work with her of just jumping in for 6 to 9 months now where I'm like, hey, I called her dad up. I was like, hey, would you let her serve on a Sunday? He said, yeah, I would. So um, it's just kind of like going on that journey of where everyone is and learning and growing and all it. But I think the key is for those of us who are leaders, always trying to be like ready to try to grow people into positions that we're in. Are you ready to like train people up and to take your spot to replace you? One. And then people who are volunteers, just have a heart of like maybe even ask the question, hey, what do I have to do to serve better? What do I have to do to
Right.
get better? And if you don't ask
Here's
that, just hear that like your leadership like me is constantly trying to say, where can I put them in the best spot to have a win? Because what I don't want to do is put someone in a bad spot, and then a Sunday happens and they have everyone look, then it's like a catastrophic failure and it was all that. You know what I mean? I don't want them
right.
to feel that. So
Okay, I've got two questions. And they're kind of big picture questions. Um, okay, so question number one is how are you communicating with your volunteers, especially with your new volunteers?
yeah, so I went through. You still there?
Am I still there? Here?
Yeah, okay, okay. It went silent
Okay.
for a second with you. It sounded like you cut out. Um, so I used a couple of different methods. So
Okay.
obviously, primary, scheduling. I always use Planning Center, and I always teach my volunteers to make sure they're locked into Planning Center because that's where you get all
Mhm.
the information. I would train
Right.
my team. Like part of my training with ProPresenter is training the team to understand what the worship team is doing. So learning to
Okay.
read chord charts and lead sheets and understand like where you can get that
Sure.
information, how that helps you. Because to me,
Right.
that helps me as an operator know exactly what we're doing. So training my
Yeah. Sure.
team to always, hey, download the Planning Center app. I'm going to get you a login. I want you to respond to, hey, this was a practice scheduling. Please be there. You know what I mean? So that was how I would get on their calendar, and I would expect teams to respond to that. As far as communication with a person, when it starts off, it's usually text because I'm communicating with them one on one. So I would tend to communicate one on one with people by text for personal
Hmm.
information that's just for them. And then I had a group me set up for our team. So for the team channel, for the ProPresenter team or the video team, I would have a group me set up that I could text information to everyone. Hey, FYI for everyone, here's a change in in our gear, in our whatever setup, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
So I would tend to use that for that. Um, I think looking back now, there would be some differences I would potentially look at exploring to use. Um,
Hmm.
Even at my time at the end of my time on staff at the large church I was at, Shannon, I was toying with how do I use like MailChimp to send out weekly communication,
Yeah.
or
Yep.
now I would probably look at like a service like Glue that offers like texting features where you can text your team
Hmm.
and have information set up. I do think it's good to have a channel where you text your whole team as a team and pour into them one on one,
Right.
but then also have a channel where you can reach out to people individually, whatever that is. I just found
Yeah.
texting was the easiest way to get everyone. The adults would
Yeah.
respond to texting, and the kids would respond to texting. Um, so,
What about recruiting? When do you recruit, and how do you recruit specifically for that pro presenter position?
right. So, some of the best recruiting things we did was where we opened it up to the church to allow
Mhm.
sorry, to allow them to see kind of a behind the scenes. So some
Okay.
really cool things we did a couple times was we did like a tech booth in the gathering place in the big spot. We had some lights with a little light board set up, and we had ProPresenter machine set
Hmm.
up, and we had a little audio machine, and you had the ability to kind of like say, "Hey, do you think you could click through slides? It's really that easy. Like, come up here and I'll teach you. Hey, do you
Yeah.
think you could click, go cues on a lighting console? You could help us up there." So we did that, and we
Hmm.
would always attract, a handful. The other thing would
Sure.
just be promotion. I think really, I think the best way to get help is for your leadership to communicate
Yeah.
the need. Um,
Sure.
a slide in your pre-roll works some. You get it. I'd get a couple leads a year on that. But really, what would peg the needle is, hey, there's a dedicated team of 10 to 12 people that are behind the scenes every day serving in our church, and you don't ever see them, and they make all this happen. And so, if you
Sure.
are interested and have background or would love to learn to run lyrics on a computer, or you have experience in the video world and can switch and cut and understand some shots, or if you have experience in the audio world, if you have experience, um, you know, call that out and actually ask for those people to step forward. Um, I think unless you're paying, some of our bands would pay people, and so they could garner people to come forward for
Hmm.
auditions. It was very hard to audition tech people because
Right.
like you just rarely would get that. So I think the best times we had was when a pastor would call out and create the felt need for here's why we need help. Here's the team that's behind there. Here's the QR code on screen. If you'll hit that, our team would love to take you out to lunch this week and talk to you about how you could serve. Like then you can fill out what you're interested in and your name and your number, and one of our tech team will get back with you and get in front of you to talk about the opportunity sometime this week or next week. That was when we had
Okay.
the most increase in opportunities to have a conversation. So
Sure.
yeah. What about you? What was the
Makes sense.
How did you guys recruit?
Well, for me, I was always kind of a constant recruiter.
Yeah.
I was always in recruiting mode. Never felt like I had enough people. One of my big kind of foundational philosophies, and actually we talked about it, I think, this week, is I never or I hardly went after rock stars. You know, I always felt like it made more sense. Well, I shouldn't say always. I kind of had to learn that. You try to go over these rock stars that every team wants, and invariably, it doesn't go according to plan. Um, so I learned that, especially for a tech position, um, I, I I would go after people that were, I don't want to say they were they were ostracized, but folks that are kind of more background type people, and those tend to be folks that are overlooked a lot. Um, and I had a lot of success finding finding people, um, kind of getting them in the system. And then what would be neat is that sometimes those folks that are like really quiet or really reserved, once they get in the swing of things, their personality starts to really blossom, and then
Hmm.
you can move them into other areas. Um,
Yeah.
but I was always, I mean, that was, that really was one of my favorite parts of the gig was team building, so I was constantly in team building mode. And also I used to do a lot of events. I used to run a lot of events.
Hmm.
So I would use these events as a way to recruit as many people as possible for this, one time only thing. And then that would start a
Allow you.
relationship. It helped me to identify folks that were at the church but not necessarily plugged in, and kind of see their personality a little bit, even if it's like a fall festival running a bounce house. It gave me a chance to kind of observe them, and then if I felt like it could be a match, I could bring them over into the kids or youth ministry.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's great. Yeah, that was one thing I tried to be really intentional about with our team, and I was probably the best one suited was to constantly be looking and talking. Um,
right.
and I got better at it, I think, as time went on towards the end of my time, for sure. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. And it could be difficult. I experienced this in kids and youth ministry, and I would guess that it's the same with tech ministry, is that you're kind of separated from the overall church experience.
Hmm.
So you really have to go out of your way to connect with people.
Right. Yeah.
It does have to be very intentional.
You've got to work at it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the encouragement is like have a plan in mind for how you're going to bring people along and grow them.
Yeah. Right.
What does that look like, and be flexible, be willing to change that depending on how things are going. Be constantly evaluating that. The master class idea for me came in the last year and a half of 2 years of my time at Shandon, because I was like, I need an avenue to bring people out where it's like I can actually run the event and a staff person isn't going to be there and beat my head, to be right there. I can actually let someone make mistakes and talk about it later, but let them run and kind of get their way out of it. Like that's what I need, and
Yeah.
that was an opportunity that
Sure.
came out of that. So constantly be evaluating, be thinking about what is the best way for me to train my volunteers at my church. Um, yeah, so I'll be instituting that. We're kind of growing to the spot enough where at the church I'm at, we're actually this summer going to hold our first kind of masterclass idea, and so I'm actually in a
Cool.
spot where I can do that. And so yeah, just constantly be open and trying to figure out what is the best way to train people in my environment. So, yep,
Sure. Love it.
sweet. Well, we'll be back next week. So let me first put this up. If you guys are interested, have any questions, as always, you can send information, questions to ProPresenter at churchvisuals.com. In the link below,
Mhm.
in the chat below, there is a link to my course at churchvisuals.com, ProPresenter 101, where I go through, I think it's 9 episodes of ProPresenter content, from learning the program from scratch to how to edit, how to export it, and how to make screen configuration tweaks. So feel free to check that out. Love for you to subscribe to that free course and go through that and let me know how that helps you or your church, and if that can serve your church and your team. Please feel free to do that. And then, yeah, if you have any questions or thoughts or comments, please feel free to drop those in the email, ProPresenter at churchvisuals.com. You can DM us directly. Sheik Mozart or Steve O. Dirks is our handles. And I would say
Yep.
one other thing, too, is next week we're planning on covering how to use the announcement function to run a separate like feed in your building. So if you wanted to have a feed outside of your worship center, how do you do that? How do you kind of set that up? How do you do that? We're going to touch on that next week. But if you have something that you would like us to cover, that announcement section probably wouldn't be super long. So if there's something else we could cover that would help you and your church, a question you have, something we can learn together, feel free to please drop that in the comments, drop us a line in the email, or shoot out, reach out to us directly. We'd love to hear from you on that. So, that'll be our plan for next week. And then the following week, we're going to be off on that week, taking a break for a day. And then we'll be back the following week, hitting it hard in May. So
Yes, sir.
sweet. Well, that's a wrap. Hope you
That's
guys
a wrap.
all have a great day. And we'll look forward to catching up next week.
That's right.